Good morning to every soul gathered here today. We rise on this Tuesday not because the road is easy, but because grace has taught us how to stand again. Today is a prayer dressed as a promise that even when the spirit feels weary, God's mercy still knows our name. This morning we do not knock timidly at heaven's door. We come boldly, carrying our fatigue, our gratitude, our unspoken hopes. We ask for grace not as a luxury but as a necessity, the kind of grace that lifts the bowed head, steadies the trembling heart, and turns ordinary homes into sanctuaries of peace. May this prayer be a gentle wind that clears the dust of yesterday. May it remind us that peace does not always arrive with silence but with assurance. And may God's grace fall upon us like light through a window, quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore. Today we choose faith over fear. We choose peace over worry, and we choose to believe that what surrounds our homes can also restore our spirits. Prayer is not the quiet corner where we go to hide from the world. It is the wide open field where we learn how to breathe again. It is the place where the soul stretches its tired limbs and remembers that it was never meant to carry every burden alone. Prayer is renewal not because it erases the troubles of our lives, but because it teaches us how to stand upright in their presence, shoulders squared, heart still beating with hope. There are mornings when the spirit wakes before the body and finds itself heavy, as if it has been walking all night through unspoken worries. The mind may be full of lists, regrets, fears that whisper before the sun has had a chance to rise. In those moments, prayer becomes the gentle hand that lifts the chin and says, "Look again." It reminds us that despair is not the whole story, that weariness does not have the final word. Prayer renews because it reintroduces us to possibility. To pray is to admit that we are human, gloriously and painfully so. It is an act of courage to say, "I need help," in a world that often rewards pretending. Prayer strips away the performance and leaves us honest before God. In that honesty, something sacred happens. The soul exhales. The weight that has been pressing on the chest loosens its grip. Renewal begins not with strength but with surrender. Prayer renews by reconnecting us to the source of our becoming. Long before we learned how to worry, we were known. Long before we learned how to fear, we were held. Prayer takes us back to that remembering. It is the sound of the soul calling home. When we pray, we step out of the noise of expectation and into the quiet assurance that we are enough because we are loved. There is a rhythm to renewal, and prayer teaches it patiently. It reminds us that life moves in seasons, that rest is as holy as labor. Prayer does not rush us. It sits with us in the mess, in the unanswered questions, in the pauses we would rather skip. Renewal does not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes like a soft rain, unnoticed at first until one day we realize the ground is no longer cracked. In prayer we gather the scattered pieces of ourselves. The self we present to the world, the self we hide, the self we are still becoming, all are invited into the conversation. Prayer does not demand perfection, it welcomes presence, and in being fully present we are made new. Not different people, but truer ones. Prayer renews the spirit by reminding it of its worth. When the world measures us by productivity, prayer measures us by being. When the world tells us we must earn rest, prayer offers rest as a gift. It tells the weary soul, you do not have to prove your value today. That truth alone can lift a spirit bowed low by constant striving. There is healing in speaking aloud what has been locked inside. Prayer gives language to grief, shape to gratitude, voice to longing. In naming these things before God, we loosen their hold over us. The spirit is renewed not because the pain disappears, but because it is shared. Pain carried alone becomes heavy. Pain offered in prayer becomes lighter, transformed by divine compassion. Prayer renews our vision. It clears the fog from our inner eyes so we can see beyond the immediate struggle. It reminds us that today is not the whole of our lives, that this moment, however difficult, is part of a longer, more generous story. In prayer, we borrow God's perspective, if only for a moment, and that borrowed vision steadies us. There are days when prayer feels like nothing more than a whisper, a single word offered between tears. Even then, renewal is happening. Especially then. Prayer does not depend on eloquence, it depends on sincerity. A broken sentence offered with faith can carry more power than a polished speech spoken without heart. Renewal does not ask for grandeur, it asks for truth. Prayer renews the spirit by teaching it patience. It reminds us that not all answers come quickly and not all doors open on our timeline. In waiting, the spirit is stretched, strengthened, deepened. Prayer teaches us to trust the process, to believe that even when we do not see change, change is still unfolding. In prayer, we are reminded that we are not alone in our becoming. God's presence does not hover at a distance, it draws near. That nearness is renewing. It tells the lonely spirit that it is accompanied, the fearful spirit that it is protected, the tired spirit that it is seen. Renewal happens when we realize we have never been abandoned. Prayer also renews by softening what life has hardened. Disappointment can make us sharp, guarded, closed. Prayer melts those edges. It reintroduces tenderness to the heart. It allows us to feel again without fear of breaking. A renewed spirit is not one that feels less, but one that feels safely. Through prayer we learn to begin again. Not because yesterday did not matter, but because today still does. Prayer offers us the grace of fresh starts, of mornings that do not carry the full weight of last night's failures. It tells us that mercy is new, that possibility is alive, that hope is not foolish. Prayer renews by aligning us with peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on circumstances, but the deep peace that lives beneath them. When we pray, we tune our spirits to a quieter frequency, one that is not ruled by chaos or fear. That alignment steadies us. It helps us walk into the day with calm intention rather than anxious reaction. In prayer, the spirit remembers how to rise. It may rise slowly with trembling knees and uncertain steps, but it rises nonetheless. Renewal is not a sudden leap. It is a faithful ascent. Each prayer is a step upward, a movement toward light. And so prayer remains our renewal, not a ritual confined to certain hours, but a living conversation that carries us through the day. It lifts the spirit because it reminds us who we are and whose we are. It renews because it reconnects us to grace. And grace, once remembered, has a way of changing everything. Grace is not the thunderclap that announces itself with spectacle. It is the steady pulse that keeps us alive when the noise has faded. It is the unseen strength that rises up in us when we are certain we have reached the end of our own endurance. God's grace does not ask whether we are ready for it, worthy of it, or prepared to receive it. It arrives because love insists on showing up. There are moments in life when effort alone is not enough. We plan, we labor, we hope, and still find ourselves tired beyond explanation. In those moments, grace becomes the power that holds us together. It is what allows the knees to keep walking when the heart feels heavy, what gives the voice courage to speak when silence feels safer. Grace sustains not by removing the weight, but by strengthening the one who carries it. God's grace is the quiet companion that walks beside us through seasons we never would have chosen. It does not rush us past pain or scold us for feeling weak. Instead, it sits with us, reminding us that survival itself is sacred. Grace whispers, "You are still here," and that whisper becomes enough to keep breathing, enough to keep believing. Grace sustains us by meeting us where we are, not where we pretend to be. It does not require polished faith or perfect understanding. It meets the doubter, the weary, the confused, and says, "I will carry what you cannot." In a world that demands constant self-sufficiency, grace offers holy dependence. It teaches us that leaning is not failing, it is trusting. There is a tenderness to grace that restores dignity to the broken spirit. When shame tries to convince us that our struggles define us, grace gently reminds us that we are more than our worst days. It sustains us by refusing to let our pain become our identity. We are not the wound, we are the ones being healed. Grace becomes power when strength runs out. It shows up in unexpected endurance, in patience we did not know we possessed, in forgiveness that seemed impossible yesterday. It moves through us quietly, often unnoticed, until one day we look back and realize we survived something that should have undone us. That survival is not accidental, it is grace at work. God's grace sustains us emotionally, teaching the heart how to bend without breaking. It allows us to feel deeply without being destroyed by feeling. Grace gives us permission to grieve fully and still believe in joy. It holds space for tears and hope in the same breath, reminding us that both can exist together. Grace also sustains the mind. When thoughts spiral and worry demands attention, grace offers clarity. Not always answers, but calm. Not always solutions, but perspective. It reminds us that not everything must be solved today, that some things can rest safely in God's hands. That mental release is a form of sustenance, a holy rest for an overworked mind. There's a strength in grace that does not shout. It does not boast. It simply endures. It is the reason people rise after falling, love after loss, believe after disappointment. Grace does not deny the reality of suffering. It insists on the possibility of meaning beyond it. That insistence becomes a lifeline. Grace sustains relationships as well. It teaches us patience with others and gentleness with ourselves. It helps us forgive, not because the wound was small, but because our spirit deserves peace. Grace softens hardened hearts and rebuilds bridges we thought had burned beyond repair. In this way, grace becomes communal, extending its power through connection. God's grace also sustains us spiritually, anchoring us when faith feels fragile. There are days when belief feels strong, and days when it feels like a thread. Grace holds even the thread. It does not withdraw when faith wavers, it remains steady and faithful. Grace believes in us even when we struggle to believe in God. Grace carries memory. It remembers who we were created to be when we forget. When the world tries to reduce us to labels, failures, or limitations, grace speaks our true name. That remembering is sustaining. It calls us back to purpose, back to dignity, back to hope. There is power in knowing that grace is not earned. It is given freely without condition. That freedom relieves the exhausted spirit. We no longer have to strive endlessly for approval or perfection. Grace tells us we are already held. That assurance becomes fuel for the journey. Grace sustains us through waiting. In the long stretches between prayer and answer, grace keeps us steady. It teaches us that waiting is not wasted time, that growth often happens underground. Grace gives us the courage to trust the unseen work of God, even when impatience presses hard against our faith. In moments of fear, grace becomes courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Grace steadies the shaking hands and strengthens the uncertain steps. It reminds us that bravery does not mean confidence, it means obedience in the face of uncertainty. Grace sustains us through change. When life shifts unexpectedly, when familiar ground gives way beneath our feet, grace becomes balance. It helps us release what was and step into what is becoming. Grace assures us that endings are not empty, they are often doorways. God's grace also teaches resilience. It does not make us immune to hardship, but it equips us to recover. It turns wounds into wisdom, scars into stories, pain into purpose. Through grace, survival becomes testimony. Grace sustains the soul by connecting us to love that does not fail. Human love can falter, but divine grace remains constant. That constancy becomes a foundation. When everything else feels unstable, grace is the ground beneath our feet. In the quiet moments of reflection, we often realize grace was present all along. In the unexpected kindness, the strength that appeared at the last moment, the peace that settled without explanation. Grace does not demand recognition. It simply works. And so we live sustained by grace, carried when we are weak, guided when we are lost, comforted when we are wounded. God's grace is not a single moment of rescue. It is a lifelong companionship. It lifts us, steadies us, and holds us until we remember how to stand again. Peace does not knock loudly before entering a home. It arrives quietly, often unnoticed, settling into corners where love is practiced daily. It is not the absence of raised voices or unbroken routines. but the presence of understanding that holds a household together when life presses hard from the outside. Peace begins at home because home is where the spirit first learns how to rest. A home is more than walls and doors. It is a living testimony of what we believe about care, patience, and grace. It is where we lay down the armor we wear in the world and reveal the truest versions of ourselves. When peace lives there, it becomes a refuge. When it is missing, even the strongest spirit feels unsettled. Peace at home is not accidental. It is cultivated through intention, prayer, and compassion. There are days when the world arrives at our doorstep heavy with demands. Work, disappointment, uncertainty, all of it follows us home. Peace meets us there, if we allow it. It does not erase the day's troubles, but it gives us space to release them. In a peaceful home, burdens are not judged. They are shared, and sharing lightens the load. Peace begins at home, when we choose gentleness over control. It grows when we listen more than we speak, when we seek understanding instead of victory. A peaceful home is not one without conflict, but one where conflict is handled with respect. Voices may rise, opinions may differ, but dignity remains intact. Peace thrives where people feel safe to be honest. Prayer becomes the heartbeat of peace within the home. When prayers are spoken or even silently offered, the atmosphere shifts. Words of faith soften sharp edges. Inviting God into a household invites calm into its rhythm. Prayer reminds the home that it is not held together by human effort alone, but by divine presence. Peace begins at home when forgiveness is practiced freely. Holding grudges poisons the air, but forgiveness cleanses it. Forgiveness does not deny hurt. It releases it. In a home where forgiveness lives, mistakes become lessons instead of life sentences. Healing replaces resentment, and peace takes root. A peaceful home honors rest. It understands that productivity is not the measure of worth. In such a space, exhaustion is met with care, not criticism. Rest becomes sacred. Laughter returns. Silence is allowed to be gentle instead of tense. Peace grows where rest is respected. Peace begins at home when love is expressed consistently, not just spoken. Love shows itself in patience at the end of a long day, in kindness when tempers flare, in small acts that say, "You matter here." These gestures build trust, and trust is the foundation of peace. The home is where children first learn what peace feels like. They learn it not from perfection, but from example. They observe how disagreements are resolved, how apologies are offered, how affection is shown. A peaceful home teaches children that calm is possible even when life is complicated. That lesson becomes a gift they carry into the world. Peace at home also requires boundaries. It understands that not every outside voice deserves entry. Protecting the home's atmosphere is an act of love. Choosing what enters through conversations, media, and attitudes shapes the spirit of the household. Peace flourishes where discernment is practiced. A peaceful home makes room for gratitude. Gratitude changes how we see each other. It shifts focus from what is lacking to what is present. Thankfulness spoken aloud strengthens connection. Peace grows when appreciation becomes habit. Peace begins at home when we allow grace to lead. Grace covers imperfections and gives room to grow. It allows us to be human without fear of rejection. In a home guided by grace, people are allowed to change. That freedom is peaceful. Even solitude within a home can be peaceful when it is respected. Space to breathe, to think, to be still, these are necessary for inner calm. A peaceful home understands that togetherness does not require constant closeness. It honors individuality within unity. Peace also comes through order, not perfection, but care. A home that tends to its space tends to its spirit. Clean corners and intentional arrangement can reflect inner calm. Peace is supported when chaos is gently managed. When hardship visits a home, peace does not leave. It adapts. It learns how to sit beside grief, how to speak softly in sorrow. A peaceful home does not rush healing. It allows pain to be acknowledged while hope remains alive. Peace holds both. Peace begins at home When laughter is welcomed, laughter heals, releases, and reconnects. It reminds the household that joy still exists. In laughter, tension loosens its grip. Peace smiles. Hospitality is another expression of peace. Opening a home to others with warmth and generosity extends calm beyond its walls. A peaceful home becomes a blessing not just to those who live there, but to those who enter. Peace requires daily choice. It is chosen in words withheld, in patience practiced, in prayer offered even when tired. Peace is not passive, it is intentional. Each day presents opportunities to nurture or neglect it. When peace begins at home, it radiates outward. It influences how we speak at work, how we respond in traffic, how we treat strangers. A peaceful home sends peaceful people into the world. In this way, peace multiplies. Peace begins at home because home is where love is refined. It is where we learn how to care deeply without controlling, how to speak truth without harm, how to stay when leaving would be easier. These lessons shape the soul. And so we pray for homes wrapped in calm, filled with understanding, guided by grace. We pray that peace will sit at every table, rest in every room, and dwell in every heart. For when peace begins at home, it has the power to heal far beyond its walls. Faith is not a garment we put on for special occasions. It is the skin we learn to live in every day. It is not reserved for moments of crisis or celebration, but practiced quietly in the ordinary hours when life feels repetitive, uncertain, or unfinished. Daily faith is the steady heartbeat of belief, while occasional hope is the gasp we take when we are afraid. One sustains, the other only survives. Daily faith wakes with us in the morning, even when enthusiasm does not. It sits at the edge of the bed when the weight of responsibility presses heavy on the chest. It does not promise that the day will be easy, but it assures us that we will not face it alone. This kind of faith does not depend on mood or outcome, it depends on trust built over time. Occasional hope often waits for signs. It looks for evidence before it believes. It asks life to prove itself worthy of optimism. Daily faith, however, moves first. It steps forward even when the path is unclear. It believes not because everything makes sense, but because God is faithful beyond our understanding. Daily faith says, I will walk anyway. Faith practiced daily becomes a discipline of the soul. It is strengthened by repetition, by showing up again and again even when prayers feel unanswered and silence stretches long. Daily faith does not panic at delay. It understands that growth often happens invisibly beneath the surface where roots are forming. There are days when hope flickers weakly, threatened by disappointment. On those days, daily faith carries the flame. It shelters belief from the wind of discouragement. It reminds us that hope is not gone simply because it feels quiet. Faith knows how to wait without giving up. Daily faith teaches us consistency over intensity. It values small, faithful steps more than dramatic leaps. A whispered prayer, a moment of gratitude, a choice to trust, these become sacred acts. Over time, they shape the spirit into something resilient, something grounded. Faith practiced daily also reshapes how we see setbacks. Occasional hope may collapse when plans fail, but daily faith adjusts. It asks, what can I learn here? Rather than why did this happen to me? Faith understands that detours are not denials. This perspective preserves peace. Daily faith lives in routine moments. It is present while preparing meals, commuting, caring for others, and resting at night. It recognizes that God is not confined to sacred spaces or formal prayers. Faith sees holiness in the ordinary and meaning in the mundane. This kind of faith builds endurance. When life stretches long and answers feel delayed, daily faith keeps us moving forward. It does not rush God, nor does it abandon trust. It teaches patience as an act of worship. Waiting becomes purposeful rather than painful. Daily faith also deepens humility. It acknowledges our limits and invites divine guidance regularly, not only when we are desperate. It keeps the heart open and teachable. Faith practiced daily says, I do not know everything, but I trust the one who does. Occasional hope can be reactive, responding to circumstances as they arise. Daily faith is proactive. It prepares the heart before the storm arrives. It builds spiritual muscle so that when hardship comes, we are not starting from nothing. We are already anchored. Daily faith shapes character. It influences how we speak, how we forgive, how we persevere. It informs decisions both large and small. Over time, faith becomes woven into identity. We do not merely have faith, we live it. Faith practiced daily also invites accountability. It asks us to align actions with beliefs. It challenges hypocrisy gently but firmly. Faith reminds us that belief without practice is fragile. Consistent faith integrates belief into behavior. There is comfort in daily faith. It provides rhythm to life. It offers familiar touchstones, prayer, reflection, gratitude, that ground us when everything else feels uncertain. These practices become places of refuge. Daily faith does not deny doubt. It walks alongside it. Doubt is not the enemy of faith. Neglect is faith practiced daily creates space for questions without surrendering trust. It allows the heart to wrestle honestly while remaining committed. Occasional hope may feel brighter in the moment, but daily faith burns longer. It is not easily extinguished by disappointment. It has learned how to survive dry seasons and still believe rain will come. Daily faith also nurtures courage. It empowers us to make difficult choices aligned with conscience rather than convenience. Faith strengthens resolve. It reminds us that integrity matters even when it costs something. This kind of faith influences relationships. It teaches patience with others' growth and compassion for their struggles. Faith practiced daily sees people through the lens of grace rather than judgment. This perspective fosters peace. Daily faith invites reflection. It asks us to examine our hearts regularly to notice where fear has crept in, where trust has weakened. This awareness keeps faith alive and responsive rather than stagnant. Faith practice daily transforms setbacks into testimonies over time. Each challenge survived becomes evidence of God's faithfulness. These memories strengthen future trust. Faith remembers what fear tries to forget. Daily faith is not loud, but it is powerful. It does not demand attention, but it commands endurance. It carries us through seasons of obscurity and waiting, reminding us that purpose does not disappear when recognition does. Occasional hope may inspire us briefly, but daily faith sustains us fully. It becomes the quiet assurance beneath every step. It teaches us to live expectantly without anxiety. Daily faith also prepares us for joy. It keeps the heart open enough to receive blessings when they arrive. It recognizes joy not as a reward but as a gift. Faith celebrates without clinging, grateful without fear. Faith practice daily teaches us to release control. It understands that trust requires letting go. This release is not weakness, it is wisdom. Faith knows that peace comes from surrender, not domination. In the end, daily faith is a lifelong conversation with God. It is built one prayer, one choice, one act of trust at a time. It grows quietly but steadily, shaping a life rooted in assurance rather than fear. And so we choose daily faith. Not the kind that appears only in emergencies, but the kind that walks with us through every ordinary day. This faith steadies us, strengthens us, and sustains us, reminding us that God's presence is not occasional but constant. Spiritual strength is not the kind of power that announces itself with noise or display. It is the quiet force that determines how we rise to meet the day before the day ever meets us. It is formed in the unseen moments, those first thoughts upon waking, those whispered prayers before stepping into responsibility. Spiritual strength shapes the day because it shapes the spirit that must carry the day's weight. Each morning arrives carrying possibility and pressure in equal measure. Without spiritual strength, we meet the hours defensively, bracing for impact. With it, we meet the day deliberately, grounded in purpose rather than reaction. Spiritual strength does not remove challenges. It equips us to face them with clarity and calm. The day often tests us early. A word spoken too sharply, a plan interrupted, a fear stirred before confidence has time to gather. Spiritual strength acts as an inner compass in those moments. It steadies our responses. It reminds us that we are not required to react to everything that provokes us. Strength gives us the pause where wisdom lives. Spiritual strength is cultivated through connection to God, to truth, to meaning beyond the immediate. This connection shapes how we interpret events. A setback becomes a lesson. A delay becomes protection. Strength does not deny disappointment. It reframes it. In this way, the day unfolds differently depending on the strength we bring into it. When spiritual strength is present, we move through the day with intention. Our words carry care. Our actions reflect values rather than impulse. We become less controlled by circumstance and more guided by conviction. Strength allows us to choose integrity even when convenience tempts us otherwise. Spiritual strength shapes how we treat others. It teaches us patience in crowded moments and compassion in tense exchanges. It allows us to see beyond behavior into the humanity beneath it. Strength does not harden the heart. It softens it enough to respond with grace. The pace of the world encourages hurry, but spiritual strength encourages presence. It reminds us that rushing robs us of awareness. Strength slows us just enough to notice beauty, notice need, notice the sacred woven into ordinary moments. This awareness transforms routine into reverence. Spiritual strength also shapes resilience. When the day delivers disappointment, strength prevents collapse. It helps us bend without breaking. It whispers that this moment is not permanent, that endurance is possible. Strength keeps us moving forward even when motivation falters. There are days when energy runs low and enthusiasm fades. Spiritual strength does not depend on emotion. It remains steady when feelings fluctuate. It carries us through obligation with quiet faithfulness. This reliability is what makes it powerful. Strength shapes our internal dialogue throughout the day. It influences what we tell ourselves when we fall short. Instead of condemnation, strength offers correction with kindness. It teaches us to learn rather than linger in regret. This inner posture preserves peace. Spiritual strength also guards the mind. It filters what we allow to settle into our thoughts. Worry may not, but strength decides whether it stays. Fear may speak, but strength chooses which voice to believe. This discernment shapes the emotional tone of the day. Strength affects how we handle success as well. It keeps us humble when things go well and grounded when praise comes. Spiritual strength reminds us that achievement does not define worth. Gratitude replaces pride. Balance replaces excess. As the day progresses, spiritual strength becomes endurance. It sustains focus in long hours and patience in repetitive tasks. It reminds us that faithfulness in small things matters. Strength keeps us from quitting prematurely. Spiritual strength also shapes how we rest. It teaches us to stop without guilt. It honors the body's need for restoration. Strength recognizes that rest is not weakness but wisdom. This understanding allows the day to end peacefully rather than in exhaustion. When conflict arises, spiritual strength becomes restraint. It holds the tongue when silence is wiser. It guides the voice when truth must be spoken. Strength chooses peace without sacrificing honesty. This balance shapes relationships. Spiritual strength influences how we face uncertainty during the day. It steadies us when plans change unexpectedly. Strength trusts that control is not required for stability. Faith replaces anxiety. This trust reshapes how uncertainty feels. Strength also shapes gratitude. It trains the heart to notice blessings even on difficult days. Gratitude does not deny hardship, it prevents hardship from overshadowing everything else. Strength keeps joy accessible. As evening approaches, spiritual strength becomes reflection. It invites us to review the day honestly without harsh judgment. It allows us to acknowledge where we grew and where we still need grace. This reflection prepares the heart for rest. Spiritual strength shapes the day by shaping our posture toward life. It keeps us open rather than defensive, hopeful rather than cynical, steady rather than scattered. Strength does not eliminate struggle. It changes how struggle is carried. Strength is not built in a single moment. It is accumulated through daily practices: prayer, gratitude, trust, surrender. These practices quietly fortify the spirit so that when the day demands much, we are not emptied. Spiritual strength also shapes legacy. The way we live each day becomes the story others observe. Strength models calm under pressure, kindness under strain, faith under uncertainty. These examples speak louder than instruction. When spiritual strength guides the day, peace becomes possible even amid chaos. Peace does not depend on external calm. It arises from internal alignment. Strength aligns us with purpose. Spiritual strength reminds us that the day is not ours to conquer but to steward. It shifts our mindset from domination to participation. We cooperate with grace rather than striving alone. This cooperation lightens the load. At its core, spiritual strength shapes the day by shaping the soul. It determines whether we move through hours reactive or responsive, anxious or assured. Strength keeps us rooted. And so we begin each day not asking for ease, but for strength. Not asking for control, but for trust. We ask for the kind of spiritual strength that carries us through each hour with dignity and faith. For when spiritual strength leads the day cannot defeat the spirit.